The contribution of women during the struggle is often downplayed. Generally, very little focus is placed on the effects of a politically active mother on the family unit. Little is said about the sacrifices made, the children who had to be sent away for safety reasons, and the marriages that didn't survive the struggle. So many people have lost so much in this struggle, and you know, potentially your family, I don't know, but here we are today. I'm just wondering how you feel about, firstly, if the contribution that women made in particular has been acknowledged, and how you feel about what you see happening at the moment.
In general, no, the women's contribution to this struggle has been, I mean, we still live in a patriarchal society,
is it down
and
to
it
that?
definitely has not been dealt with. One of the things I should have said maybe earlier was that part of the fascinating stuff with Medu and so forth was how, as a collective, we dealt with women's issues. Given that most of my comrades were male at that stage. There were few women, but very few, and most of the women were not South African. I've always had a theory, but this is purely theory. It's hard enough to become a black woman artist in South Africa. To become a black woman artist and a black woman revolutionary cuts you down by another level. So if
it could actually be, you know, seen as a dynamic combination and somebody who's got a fantastic story to tell and
exactly
stuff to learn from.
Whereas where women did that, of course, publicly you would deny it in any case. Yeah. I mean, we spent all of our time, MK, you must be joking. I don't know anything about MK. Me? No, I'm a nice American woman who possibly has some bad friends. But, I mean, after Tommy's death, Tommy Mignelli, who was killed in the 85 raid, and Tommy was firstly a brilliant artist, truly brilliant, and a brilliant intellectual in terms of understanding art. And one of the people that I think if I were to say people I've learned from as an artist, Patika and Tommy were the two that I would undoubtedly talk about. But it's always shocked me how much after his death, so many people treat him as, of course, he was just an artist who got caught up in the liberation struggle. Whereas Tommy himself would have said, this was his life, and he knew he was going to die in it. I mean...
Like I say, if that sort of contribution is not really seen and acknowledged today, I mean, where does it leave, again, women, the fact that we've got this patriarchal
for women,
society?
I mean, what I was going to say about Tommy is, of course, Tommy denied that he was in MK to most people. That was his public he was in MK, he was in the camps, he was properly trained, and he was in structures the whole time I was in Botswana. There's no question about it. I find it quite shocking how often his art is, people won't accept that. In terms of women in MK, again, the usual denial was, I'm just a woman and I've got kids and I can't be involved in something like that, even if, of course, you're involved in it up to your neck. Yeah. I mean, I had a few rules. One of the rules I tried to enforce in my house when my kids were there was I didn't want guns in the house because most gun accidents are kids who are fooling around with a gun they shouldn't be playing with. That rule was usually followed, but not always. After the kids left, my involvement with MK became much deeper. We did occasionally have, actually not so much guns, there were hand grenades in the house at one stage. And I was given the short course in how to pull a pin out and throw it. No, but I obviously never had to do it, and thank God, probably because I doubt I could have. But it was seen as a self-defense measure at that stage because at that point I probably was potentially a target.
Right, yeah.
Most of the actual work I did militarily was logistics, helping people getting from here to there.
And did that affect your
putting people up, that kind of thing.
Your experience in the MK?
Absolutely.
And telling the women's side of things?
When I was in Medu, which was before I was quite so involved with MK, I mean, I knew about it and was in the discussions about it was how do you portray the armed struggle, especially when, of course, you were not going to have photographs or realistic drawings of people, which was security-wise was a bad idea. And so we had long discussions about that. One of the discussions we had with Tommy particularly was, as everybody who's done drawings about the military struggle, the image of the woman carrying a baby in one hand and the gun on her back on the other is a sort of a cliche in some ways, or a classic maybe. And we had a long debate about whether we should use that image. The argument that was made, which I completely agreed with, was that, really, the only times you would actually carry your gun and your baby at the same time is if you were ambushed and had to get out of there in a hurry, and it's actually a symbol of defeat, not a symbol of strength. Yes. Yeah. And there was a story about a woman who was in MK, in Lusaka, whose baby was ill, and there was a raid on the house she was in. She was actually in charge of that unit. So she put the baby under the bed and organized the defense in the middle of winter. And 4 hours later, when it all calmed down and turned out the attack didn't happen, the baby was sitting there very quietly but developed a very bad cold, and she, of course, felt horrible about it and so forth. And that was always for me the symbol of no, babies and guns really don't mix. They're not something we want to mix, actually. And I think
there are quite a few examples, aren't there?
Yeah. And the funny thing was about that, so we actually put a ban on carrying a baby and a gun in pictures. A couple of years ago, I had this discussion with Tenchium Tinso, who has remained a friend for years since then. And she said, but I always liked that picture. It was such a symbol of how we want to bring up our children with this respect for women. We've done workshops with women's groups on abortion. If you're poor and in a township or in a rural area, your chances of getting the free abortion that was promised to you were close to nil. And the statistic we were given at that workshop was that there was over 90 deaths a month from failed abortions in South Africa. That was 3 years ago.